Yeah, this is very profound, and it gives a, as you said earlier as well, that it gives a continuity to the scheme of things, to places, to our own culture, and I think that is what makes these epics so great. That even after thousands of years, apart from imparting priceless wisdom, as you said, I think the great thing about this podcast is there's a continuity from the beginning to the end. So as you said that what is not there in Rajo, Tamas, and Satogun, and what is dominant over a particular
Absolutely.
time.
You are absolutely right. That is
So,
the essence of what is being told to us. Also in the Gita. In the Gita, also it is said that we have all the three qualities or vices or whatever. These are called gun, not vices. Rajotama and uh, tamas, whatever. But
Sato,
these
Rajo,
are all gun. But
Gun.
we are a combination of all the gunas. We have to find out which one to develop in us.
I think, ma'am, we have got a lot to talk about. So, hello and welcome to another episode of the podcast. And in today's episode, we are going to discuss about something that has inspired people in our country for generations now. I'm talking about the rich mythology that we have and the learnings that arise out of it. And to discuss about it, we have with us today Ma'am Indrani Deb. So let me tell you something about her. So, Madam is a principal of Women's College in Purulia, West Bengal. She has authored 5 books. She is an international speaker, has won many professional achievements, along with a Sahitya Akademi Award for Translation in 2008. And welcome to the show, ma'am.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Arun. And I'm very glad to be able to speak about and talk about one of my favorite subjects, that is mythology and mythological characters. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I guess the pleasure is all mine, ma'am. So, I just forgot to mention one thing. Ma'am has also written a book, The Myth and the Mind, and it's a very profound read. I will really ask you guys to check it out. So, starting with the conversation, ma'am, I think we have many great epics in our rich literature that we have. There's one literature that is very close to my heart, that is Mahabharata. Every time I hear about it, there is a newness to the story, there are nuances to it, there are new learnings to it, or maybe a variations to the story that we have already heard. Now, the first time when I heard about it, someone told me that you don't keep a copy of Mahabharata at your home because it can cause infighting or it can bring bad luck or something like that. So, Mahabharata has different attributions to it. How do you view this great epic of ours?
Actually, myths have been we can say, they have come in various countries in various ways all over the world. And actually, mythologies are some of the earliest expressions of human beings in various countries. And what we see is this, that the study of myths and legends, they show the culture, the essential culture of a country, of a society, of a civilization. And not only that, the most popular, the most developed myths of the world, in the entire world, they come from the most ancient and the most developed civilizations. And not only that, we can even go so far as to say that myths emerge from a well developed culture, from a well developed collective imagination, and a well developed worldview and philosophy.
Wow.
Now, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, they also represent the most ancient civilization, one of the most ancient civilizations of the world, that is the Indian civilization. Actually, we speak about the Ramayana and the Mahabharata in India. You cannot imagine. the number of myths that have arisen from the Indian subcontinent, including the southern parts of India. The southern part of India, the Dravidian mythologies, they are also very rich. Now, we continuously speak about the Mahabharata because the Mahabharata is the longest myth in the whole world. And there is a saying in India that what is not there in the Mahabharata is not there in India, in Bharat. So everything that we have in Bharat is there in the Mahabharata. And I absolutely don't agree with the idea that keeping the Mahabharata at home is inauspicious and keeping the Ramayana at home is auspicious, because both to me are mythologies. Both to me are the essence of our culture, not just religious texts. To me, actually, I read mythology as something essential to our civilization. I just don't take them as a religious expression. So that is why I believe we have always had the Ramayana at home. We have always seen our parents keep the Ramayana at home, the Mahabharata at home all the time. And so I have a particular affinity with these texts.
That makes us too, ma'am. I too really have great affinity, and every time I listen to something, there's some newness to it. There's something that there's to learn. For instance, let's take an example from your book, Sahdev. If you talk about the Pandavas, we have so many stories, and I belong to Uttarakhand, and we have so many places that have rich attribution to the Mahabharata. We have places, for instance, there's a place called Bhimtal that's near Nainital that has a story related to Mahabharata.
Yes.
And then there's a place that's close to my maternal home, and this place is called Dunagiri. Then we have Pandav Kholi. These are lesser known places, but these have very rich stories to our epics. Now, when we talk about Sahdev is a Pandav about which so much has not been spoken. When I read your book, and when I got to know about the Trikal Dishti and the conundrum that Sahdev might have faced, I mean, that is very beautiful. Would you like to, elaborate on that?
Actually, Sahadev is I have a liking for some of these characters who have not been well projected by people, most people, and Sahadev is one of them. I mean, so much importance has been given to the first three brothers that Nakul and Sahadev have been well sidelined most of the time. So I had read up on these two brothers particularly, sons of the Ashwini twins. And I particularly liked the character of Sahadev very much. And I thought of writing about him in my book. Now, the Trikal of Sahadev is, let me just mention one point about myths nowadays. There are some aspects of myths that ostensibly make them limited to some people. For example, most myths have grown around a kind of religious framework in all the world that may or may not exist today. Like, for instance, the Egyptian mythology or the Norwegian mythology. In India, the religious framework still exists. That is one important feature of our civilization and our mythology. Another aspect of mythology which is not accepted in the rationalist times that we live in the scientific times that we live in, is the supernatural aspect, the extraordinary aspect in which characters and situations are depicted. Many people, I have heard, this is tragic, but I have heard people say, I hate myths because they are not true, they are not real. Now, when we come to say Sahadev, in the myth, in the Mahabharata, the story is so implausible rationally and so incredible that normally one will not be able to accept it just on face value. I have spoken about it in the book that in the myth, Pandu, the father of the five sons, he had said that when I die, my sons should eat my body. In that way, they will get the knowledge of the three worlds, Trikaldashan. Now, Krishna, he did his best to stop them from doing so. Why? He told them that this is not something that you should do. Eating the flesh of your father is not acceptable in any society, let alone Indian society. And he stopped the brothers from doing it. But what he did, I'm talking about the myth. What he did, he entered the body of Pandu and ate it from inside, and he himself became immortal. And he himself got the knowledge of the worlds. Now, Sahadev, he saw some ants carrying away a toe of his father. And he took it away from the ants and he ate it. In that way, he got Trikaldashan. And Krishna became immortal except for the toe. That is the myth. Now, what I have done, I am not exactly a rationalist in the true sense of the term because, well, I am a rationalist, but I do believe that there are many things in heaven and earth that are not dreamt of in anybody's philosophy, much less the modern philosophy. What I did, I took this myth in my story and I tried to give it a rational framework so that it could be acceptable in the modern psyche. In my story, I showed that the story of Sahadev is being told to Dhritarashtra. Uh, if you remember the story, you will find that Dhritarashtra in the beginning is uh, speaking about all the brothers and his sons, and with Sanjay who can see everything. Sanjay tells him the story and laughs at it, and he says, "This is the story of Sahadev's Trikaldashan." But I don't believe it. Because, why don't I believe it? Because Pandu's body was burnt at the pyre, and Madri, his second wife, she committed sati on his body. So, how could it be eaten? It is completely unmarked, the body. But I have seen, because Sanjay can see everything. So Sanjay said, but I have seen that Pandu for a long time sat with his youngest son Sahadev on his knee, telling him all kinds of, giving him all kinds of wisdom throughout the time that he had spent with his son. Now, this is something that can be believed, that the father is imparting his own wisdom to his son. Now, Krishna says in one episode which I showed, which is absolutely true, Krishna and Sahadev, true according to the myth, that is, Krishna and Sahadev were very close. Sahadev was one of the biggest devotees of Krishna, and they were very friendly with each other. Krishna told Sahadev that I know that you have been given Trikal Darshan, but you have to obey me. You cannot say what you have heard or what you know, what you have seen. You cannot tell it. That means even if you can see into the future and you can see something bad happening in the future, you cannot say it. If you do, then you will die. And Sahadev also then talks with Krishna and he bargains with him that then Krishna, I will not say it, but you have to give your word that you will always be by our side and we five brothers will always be together. All myths, come together at some point. All myths of the world. Myths like this we have had in Greek myths also. If you remember the German scholar Max Muller, he was a great, uh, scholar of mythologies of all the world, and he had a book called Comparative Mythology. Comparative myth.
Heard about it.
Yes,
Heard about that book.
yeah.
Yes, yes.
And in that book, he also speaks about where these myths come together. To my mind, even in Greek myths, you have characters like, say, Cassandra, a priestess. She could also see into the future, but people wouldn't believe her. She used to tell them that this will happen. The Trojan War will end everything. You will all die. Nobody listened to her. Sahadev's point is a little different. He couldn't speak. He knew, but he couldn't say it. He was
But he couldn't say it.
stuck by a vow.
Uh, it's I think the best part about it, like you have said right now, is the way that you have brought different cultures in light as well. There are 2 points specifically that you have mentioned, and there's one question that I would like to ask you. The first thing is, uh, when now I recollect the stories as I have heard it, because Mahabharata is such a vast literature that there are many stories, there are many pulps to it, and honestly, I think it requires rigorous study to go through it. And and now I believe, like, there has been much that has been talked about the three elder brothers, and regarding Nakul and Sahdev, we don't know that much. Now this particular story about Pandu, is that mentioned in the Mahabharata per se?
Yes. I mean, the
The regarding
mythological story is that he told his sons to eat his body, but Krishna didn't allow.
right,
And
yeah,
Sahadev ate one toe because he found it. But Krishna ate
yeah.
him from inside the body. This is what is said in the Mahabharata. But in my
Oh,
story, I have changed it a little bit and given it a rational framework, even though I have mentioned the Mahabharata story.
this is very interesting to know. I was never aware of it. This was a very new angle. And there's one more thing. There's one more story that I have brought in there regarding Sahadev, is when once he was called by Duryodhan to function as an astrologer.
Astrologer.
So before the astrologer, and to I am not able to recollect to what duties that he was asked to do, but still, uh, for doing that, he, I think, codes that. he was doing that in his capacity as an astrologer and not as a Pandav. And I think there is this concept of dharma that comes in between here.
It
So
absolutely.
how do you view dharma? I was reading another book where dharma was defined very elaborately, but this is a concept that I continuously want to know about, to improvise, to learn more about what exactly does dharma means. For one, I try to read. I think it was Sir Aurobindo's essay on Gita. Or this book, essays on Gita by Sri Aurobindo. I
Yes,
try to
yes,
read it,
it is
but
very
but
famous
my
book.
but my intellect couldn't didn't allow me to grasp the concept fully. It is a very deep literature,
Yes,
and I
yes.
think it
The
will take me many
Aurobindo
years
is
to
fantastic, but he is very erudite. Now,
what
actually,
is the
about
concept of
the
dharma, ma'am?
dharma which you are asking, it is
Yeah.
in Indian mythology and in Indian culture, in the Gita, dharma plays a very important role. Now, what I have shown, because if you remember the title of my book, it is Myth and the Mind, Psychological Tales of Mythological Characters. I am trying to bring out the psychological conflicts of the characters which I have chosen to speak about. Now, in you have raised the point of Sahdev, for instance. I will mention other characters also. In Sahadev's case, if you remember, I have mentioned three aspects of this great Pandava. One is that he was a warrior, a Pandav son who fights in the war, and I have also mentioned that he was the best swordsman among all the Pandavas. Nakul and Sahadev, they were both very good with the sword fighting. So he was the best swordsman among the Pandavas. So he was a warrior first and foremost. Secondly, he was a doctor. He is a son of the Ashwini twins. And actually, I have mentioned the story where he brings Kanna to life also, back to life. Kanna would have died after giving up his armor, the armor that he was born with.
The Kavach and Kundal,
Yes, the Kavach and Kundala. After he gave it up, he was in a very bad position. And actually, Kunti knew that he was her son, and it was Kunti who pleaded with Nakul and Sahadev to save him because the war has not started. Sahadev, of course, knew what was happening, but he couldn't say it. Nakul didn't know anything. Sahadev saved Kanna also in his capacity as a doctor. The third capacity that we see him in is what you said, as an astrologer, because he could see into the future. He had Trikal Darshan. He was a great astrologer. Now, you will find that when these three dharmas, he has a dharma of a warrior, he has a dharma as a doctor, he has a dharma as an astrologer. The problem crops up when these dharmas conflict with each other. Like, for instance, when he was bringing Karna back to life, his dharma as a warrior is conflicting with his dharma as a doctor. But he did it at that time, saying, telling his mother, telling Karna later on, that on the battlefield I will not leave him. If it was the battlefield, I would not spare him. That now you have called me as a doctor. My first and foremost dharma is to save the patient. And he did it. Now, as an astrologer, Duryodhan, of course, is their enemy.
Definitely.
Is their enemy.
Definitely.
And Duryodhan wants to organize a huge puja, Durga Puja, before going to war. He wants to know the best time, the auspicious moment on which to perform that puja. But he could not have faith on the astrologers in his own palace. He had faith in Sahadev. Why? Because he knew that Sahadev will not lie. This he knew very well. So he called Sahadev, and in spite of his brothers and his mother telling him, "Don't go, they are going to kill you," Sahadev went because he was called as an astrologer. And Krishna, he met Krishna on the way. Krishna said that you are going to tell them the truth. Sahadev said, "I can't lie." Krishna said, "Okay, you tell them the truth, then I will do something myself." So Sahadev went, he gave the auspicious moment, and what Krishna did, the cunning, wily politician that he was, and of course the Devta, he he arranged at that moment that there will be an eclipse. So the auspicious moment passed, and then Duryodhan did the puja.
Oh, this is so deep. I mean, this is so refreshing. I never. The best part is, I think the best part about Mahabharata is there's so much that you don't know. Every time I read a book, I go through a video, talk to people, there's something new I will get to know about Mahabharata. It's so vast and so rich, like this story. Now, you have brought in a very interesting aspect of Sahadev, and as far as I can recollect from the book, it was Shakuni who suggested Duryodhan to, I think, call Sahadev. That's what you have written.
Right.
But now my focus is shifting towards Shakuni, because I believe that this even Sahdev can take a day to talk about. But right now, I just want to talk about Shakuni. Now, Shakuni is one of the most interesting, prominent character of Mahabharata,
Absolutely.
and he belongs to the Gandhar Pradesh. I think that would lie in modern Afghanistan or northwest Pakistan of
Yes. Yes.
the
He comes
current
from Gandhar,
geographical disposition.
from the mountains.
Gandhar, from the mountains. Now, one question that I had also written for discussing with you in this podcast was, we all know of the delinquencies that Shakuni did. We all know of the misdeeds that were there by Shakuni, but there was a very interesting conversation written in your book when between and that was between Shakuni and Sahdev, I believe.
Yes. Yes.
So now now the war has started, and Mr. Shakuni finally gets what he has all along wanted. That was the destruction of the Kuruvansh,
The
if
Kuru
we say
Vansh.
it that
Yeah.
way,
Yes.
the Kuruvansh. So now when Shakuni had the chance to flee, when he had the chance to run from the battlefield, Shakuni still chose to fight. Now, how do you view this whole situation panning out?
Actually, this was one of my this is one story that I never get tired of, because Shakuni is a character who I am extremely interested in psychologically. Psychologically. Now nobody likes Shakuni. We all know that. But what I wanted to show in the story was that Shakuni Mama was not born. He was made. That is why
Oh, wow.
I gave the previous story of how he got his life. He would have died. He
This
was
was so profound, ma'am.
it,
Shakuni Mama was not born; he was made.
he was made.
Unbelievable. Yes, yes. Please, ma'am, carry on.
Actually, what happened was that his father Subal, his sister was Gandhari, you know that, and uh, Subal married his daughter to the Kuru clan. How did this happen? Because Bhishma, he came to attack Gandhar, and seeing Gandhari, the daughter of Subal, he said that I am going to marry Gandhari to my brother Dhritarashtra, who is blind. Subal said, you marry him, you marry her. Why don't you have conquered my country? Why don't you marry her? He said, no, no, I am celibate. I have taken a vow that I will not marry. So the next in line is my brother Dhritarashtra. He is blind, but that is no matter. He is the king. So your daughter will marry a king. Now, after this, what happened is this: Gandhari came to uh, the Kuru Vansh. She bore 100 sons. Her father also, by the way, had 100 sons. I mentioned it in my
Okay.
I mentioned it in my story that it must have been hereditary because Subal had
I,
a
I, I
hundred.
I don't remember it. I don't remember it, but now when you say it, it's like, I mean, this is very different, you know. This is not a genetical trait that you want to inherit.
I don't know. Maybe in
For,
those days they did want to inherit it because 100 sons
yeah,
was something they. If you remember the story of Savitri and Satyavan, Savitri also, if you remember, begged 100 sons from Yama.
I heard about it. I don't know much, but I've heard about it.
So
It's so great to talk to you because you can always draw parallels from these different stories. That's really great.
now what is happening is this: Subal also had 100 sons and one daughter, Gandhari. Gandhari also bore 100 sons and one daughter, exactly the same. And Duryodhan was her eldest son. Much later, when Duryodhan was a stripling of a boy, he heard somewhere, by that time, he heard somewhere that his mother had been married off to a goat by his father. Bhim told him, right? Bhim told him that you are the son of a widow. He got very angry. I am the son of a widow. And he went to his mother and asked her. She said, no, no, I don't know anything about it. You go to Bhishma Pitamaha and ask him. Now, Duryodhan was very persistent. He found out the story. The story is this, that it was predicted that Gandhari's first husband would die. So she was married off to a goat, and the goat was killed, and then she was married to Dhritarashtra. Hearing of this, Duryodhan went off with an army to attack the his grandfather's kingdom again, Subal's kingdom, and he captured Subal and the 100 sons, and with his army, of course. He was only a young boy then, and he said that the whole 101 people will get only one handful of rice to eat per day. One person. That means one person can be kept alive. Subal said that the cleverest person among us will live, all the others will die. The cleverest person will live to get revenge on the Kuru clan. And that is what happened. Shakuni proved that he was the most cunning. You can read the story. I have explained it very well. I'm not going to tell the story again. And ultimately, what happened, Shakuni saw each and every one of his brothers dying one by one and his father dying. Each time he took the oath that I am going to bring about the destruction of the Kuru clan. Not only because they have killed all of us, but also because my sister Gandhari is almost blind. I mean, she has made herself blind by tying a cloth round her
The
eyes,
patti, yeah, the
patti
cloth,
round
yes,
her
yes.
eyes, so that she can be uh, she can be a true wife to her husband. Shakuni started taking revenge. At the end of the story, we find that when he sees all the sons of his own sister Gandhari, all 100 sons being killed one after another, in the worst way possible by one person, that is Bhim. Because if you remember, Bhim took the oath that I, with my bare hands, I am going to kill each and every one of these brothers. And he did it. The way he killed Dushashan was horrible. Shakuni saw it with his own eyes. By the time he came to the end of the war, all the brothers had been killed. The Kuru clan was lying on the battlefield, dead. He has got what he wanted, but this is not what he wanted. Because now he finds that his sister Gandhari is totally bereaved. What have I done? This is what he's saying. I loved my brothers, I loved my father, I loved my sister. That is why I took revenge. But ultimately, I have brought this terrible thing happening to their family. I don't want to go back to Gandhar. I will be unhappy for the rest of my life. I will live with my sons. And what has happened to Gandhari? 100 sons dead. He couldn't do it. So he said to Sahadev that Sahadev, I can't go back. Sahadev gave him the opportunity. You go back. That will be your punishment. He said, I won't go back. Because Krishna has said that those who die on the Kurukshetra battlefield, they will go, they will have moksha, they will go to heaven. I prefer heaven. I don't want to go back to my country and live a very happy life. I'm sorry. He died a very tragic death. Sadev killed him ultimately, but he died a tragic death, a heroic death also. He could
Wow.
have saved himself. He didn't.
These tales from Mahabharata, they inspire bravery, they impart you wisdom, they tell you those little dharm sankats.
Yes, that
As
is
we
the
say in
point,
Hindi, chote
Dharm
chote dharm
Sankat.
sankat.
This is the point that I
Yeah.
wanted to make. The psychological
So
tales. The
the
same thing
psychological
happened
tales.
with Ravan. If you remember, you asked me about Sahadev being an astrologer. Ram called Ravan to perform his puja for him because he was
Yeah.
the Brahmin. And Ram said that no, I will want Ravan to perform my puja for me for my victory. And Ravan, he knew that he was performing the puja for Ram's victory, but he did it nevertheless. That is his dharma at that time. You see,
The
Ravan was
way
also a
I
great
listen,
man.
the way I listen to these story, it's these men, they were of great stature, in a sense that for them the dharma, the way of doing things was much greater than the end result, even if it meant the destruction for themselves. Now, when I speak of it, that when you were telling the story of Bhishma Pitama going and bringing that King Dhritarashtra bride in the form of Gandhari, now then suddenly all these things flashed through my mind, and an inference came to me that this celibacy of Bhishma Pitama, earlier known as Devrat, and King Shantanu's affinity towards Satyavati, and every one of these actions that Bhishma Pitama performs, he goes for Amba, Ambika, and Ambalike as well. That is a different story.
That
That
is,
is a different
all those
tangent.
are different stories.
Different tangents. Then he
Yes.
goes for Gandhari as well. And him being a celibate and then going off for choosing wives for his brother. Uh, this has always played a very important role in the eventual outcome at what happens in Kurukshetra.
Absolutely.
That's how I see it. The
Absolutely.
curses coming together.
Now that is,
So
the I would say why I think that Ved Vyas was probably the greatest poet, the greatest writer in the world, is that he is building a story like the Mahabharata, which is so huge, the longest myth in the whole world. But you will find a connection with the beginning and the end. Everything is connected together. Nothing is disparate. In the very beginning, you find the stories which will have their effect at the end in some way or the other. That is very, very important in a story. It is a continuous tale, it is not a set of disparate tales.
everyone has a reason for being in that story. Every
Absolutely.
action that was told in that story had some consequence. That what happens in Kurukshetra and then what eventually happens after that. So this is very beautiful, very profound, and it gives you that curiosity that how grand things are, and how these grand things which are much bigger than ourselves, they come together and they give results and conditions that we cannot even think about.
Now,
And
actually, this
one
is what I was talking about. That myths actually present a model for human behavior.
wow, yes. Now I
And
can see it the way you're saying
the
it. Yeah.
mythological world that we see, it gives us all the aspects of human behavior, like, say, war and peace, life and death, good and evil, truth and falsehood. But they present them on a larger than life scale, like as if we are watching them through a magnifier. Now, if you magnify something, you can see it better, you can see every element better. That is why what we see is this, that human virtues or even human vices are all on a large scale. We can see them better, and that is why mythological stories provide such, it is such a wonderful source for psychological study.
Indeed. I mean, I really get goosebumps thinking about this whole story. And even if you recollect, I had told you that I would want to discuss about certain things in this particular podcast, but I think that it wouldn't be justice to do that if I go into the stories of Gargi and all that. But what I really want to do right now is keep myself restricted to the Mahabharata, and then it brings me to another very interesting story, and the last story of your book, The Myth and the Mind. I've
Sambhav.
just Sambhav, yeah. And this was something that I again was not aware of, and the way even for Samba things happen, and the way that he brings about the downfall of the Yadav dynasty over there. So even for him, for 12 years, these different things were happening when even he was not there. So one thing I wanted to confirm with you was after reading the story. So Krishna Bhagwan left his earthly body, and after that the whole mayhem happened with the Yadavas in the Dwarka.
Actually, the seeds were sown when from the time of Samba himself, from even before the Kurukshetra war. Because if
Yeah,
you remember, Duryodhan's daughter was Samba's wife.
wife. Yes, yes,
But Krishna was on the side of the Pandavas. It is a big conundrum actually. Duryodhan's daughter is marrying Krishna's son, but Krishna is not on the side of Duryodhan. Even from before the war, even before the Kurukshetra war, the seeds are being sown continuously. And Samba, from the time of his birth, it was prophesied that this is going to be the destroyer of the clan. And
yeah,
after that, what happened was that Samba's character was like that. He was extremely mischievous. He had no respect for any kind of rules, regulations, duties, morality, nothing. His father was mischievous also as a child. And actually, Krishna's mischief is always something we speak about with a lot of enjoyment. But Samba's mischief was not enjoyable. He provided a lot of problems for the community. And it was on one of those mischievous occasions that his father cursed him with that curse. And he was also cursed by Durvasa that
yeah.
you
The
are an Ardhanarishwar. You will bear that iron mace he pretended to be a
yeah,
woman with. You will
yes, yes,
give
yes.
birth to that iron mace, which will destroy your clan. Now, in my story, in the Mahabharata, in the Puranas, what is shown is this, that the iron mace was really given birth to. In my story, I did not show it that way. I showed it as a dream sequence, because I wanted to give some kind of rationality so that people will understand it from the modern perspective. I showed it as a dream sequence that he was suffering the pangs of birth tremendously, and then ultimately the iron mace fell from the ceiling where he had put it up. And that mace brought death to his community.
And even his connection with Konark Temple,
Yes, I think this is a
that was
story.
something.
This is a story that people don't know. That it was the original Konark temple was made by Samba, designed by Samba.
Yeah, this is very profound, and it gives a, as you said earlier as well, that it gives a continuity to the scheme of things, to places, to our own culture, and I think that is what makes these epics so great. And even after thousands of years, apart from imparting priceless wisdom, as you said, I think the great thing about this podcast is there's a continuity from the beginning to the end. So as you said that what is there in Bharat will you will find there in Mahabharat. What is not there in Mahabharat is not there in Bharat. So I mean, this epic has history, it has culture, it has wisdom. Now, before we head on to the end of the podcast, and ma'am, I would really request that we connect again sometime so that we can discuss about the other stories that obviously due to the paucity of time today. Uh, we couldn't take up, as I felt that it won't be justice to those deep stories, the stories of Gargi, the story of Vibhishan that I even mentioned in your book, and I think it merits an episode of its own. But before we go, as you have also, I believe that you have also studied about different mythologies, the Western mythology. I have a piece of my personal mythology on my hand. So I have this phoenix tattoo here. So this is a tattoo of
Wow.
the phoenix.
Okay,
So
that's
for
interesting.
listeners who do, yeah, so for listeners who don't know, phoenix is a symbol from the Greek mythology, I believe, ma'am.
Actually, it is a symbol from Greek mythology, it is a symbol of Christian mythology, it is a symbol of Roman mythology. The phoenix is supposed to be a single bird. According to the myth, there is only one bird, not two. That is why there is no male and female. That is
Okay, yeah.
why they cannot produce children, they cannot give birth to babies. So the phoenix, one bird, it lives for 1000 years. After 1000 years, slowly, towards the end of its life, it slowly becomes, it loses its feathers and everything. And then suddenly, in a burst of fire, it is consumed in ashes. And from the ashes rises another small bird, another phoenix. So actually, the original bird, it dies in a burst of fire. From the ashes comes out another bird. Rebirth, the story of resurrection.
Story of resurrection. Yeah.
So
I,
actually,
I I have
it
yeah.
is
I have always wondered, ma'am.
yes, yes.
I have always wondered whether Phoenix has, and that's why I'm asking you that whether there is any parallel of Phoenix in our own culture. Is there any parallel there?
There are birds in our own culture. In the Indian mythology, as you know, Garud and birds like these. But in our culture, there is no single bird which dies like that. Birds, of course, we have in our mythology lots of birds which have been used for various purposes, particularly for good. Even those birds which are large, which are strong, and which are used by the gods for war, even these birds, they have, in Indian mythology, nobody is totally good and nobody is totally bad. This is one important thing in Indian mythology. I mean, there is no clear division between good and bad. Like Ravan is a great man, so is Shakuni. Duryodhan has very good qualities, even though he was on the side of evil. So nobody is totally good or bad. Even the birds in Indian mythology are like that. But there is no one phoenix in our mythology.
I think I would like to add one more thing here before. So it's like every story that comes out. I think we can talk for hours and hours if you would like, but still, I think it's an interplay of Rajo, Tamas, and Satogun, and what is dominant over at particular
Absolutely,
time.
you are absolutely right. That is
So,
the essence of what is being told to us. Also in the Gita. In the Gita, also it is said that we have all the three, qualities or vices or whatever. These are called gun, not vices. Rajotama and uh, tamas, whatever. But
Sato,
these
Rajo,
are all gun. But
Gun.
we are a combination of all the gunas. We have to find out which one to develop in us.
I think, ma'am, we have got a lot to talk about. The last bird that I would really like to talk about is in this particular episode. Have you heard about Kak Bhasandi?
Excuse me, please. Pardon?
Kag Bhasandi, ma'am, one of the birds in Ramayana is
Yeah,
mentioned.
yes,
There's
yes,
also
yes, yes, yes.
so I think, yeah, I could see that smile on your face. So it's a very lesser known bird of our culture, and this particular story was told to me by my father, and so he always viewed this particular bird of immense importance. And I'm not very sure. I may be very wrong for the facts, and I would like to apologize if that is so. But was it a bird that really was living through different? It lived through Dwapar Yuga. It
It
lived through
lived
Treta Yuga.
through various generations. It lived
There's also a
through
lake in
various
Uttarakhand.
yugas. It was a
Yeah,
bird
Yuga.
that saw various yugas in front of it happening.
Yes, yes.
That is why, whenever it came up, whenever it was seen in a certain yuga, people saw it as something propitious, something great happening, that the bird has come to give us some advice, some wisdom. It was seen as something symbolic. Actually, myths are symbolic. Everything in a myth is symbolic. You just have to interpret
Yes.
it that way.
Oh, so great, ma'am. So great. And even though we couldn't touch on the different topics, we would definitely do it one day. Because it was so profound that talking about these things required time, a great amount of time. Because like even for Sahdev and Shakuni, the so-called lesser characters, lesser known characters, not lesser characters, but lesser known characters of Mahabharata, they have a story of their own. They have something to tell us.
Everyone has a story. Everybody. And every person is an individual. Nobody is like anybody else.
I read it about somewhere related to these gun, and I will end the podcast with this because I'm very sure I can go on because this is a thing that really interests me a lot. So I was reading about it somewhere that these particular guns, the Rajotamas and Satugun,
A Satagun,
these
yeah.
these yeah, these three in a particular ratio or proportion, in a particular proportion rather, they constitute the prakriti of a person or the individualistic personality of a person, and they are like in different proportions, so you have to find your own prakriti so that you can pursue your own purushart. So this is something that I will leave on for a later podcast to cover because it's so
That
wide
will
and
be
broad.
nice, yeah.
So thanks a lot, ma'am, for connecting and telling us so many different stories and so much of profound wisdom. It
Thank
has been
you
great talking
for
to you.
organizing this podcast. And actually, it gave me an opportunity to speak about one of my favorite topics. So, thank you. Thanks to you that you have brought it up. And we can discuss other topics on a different day.
Sure,
Thank
sure,
you
ma'am.
so
Because
much.
I definitely think it will be a different episode of its own merit. So thanks a lot for guys for listening to this episode, and thanks a lot to ma'am. And see you in another episode of the podcast.